Here we are. It's time for another marketplace, exploring the marketplace conversation. And we're doing a live one with somebody who I feel like when I read his bio and when we've talked to him, I feel like I haven't really lived life yet. I feel like I should be in my 20s compared to the fighter pilot, business coach, consultant, Ed Rush, which is amazing. So, what do you think?
Well, I think that he likes to go fast.
Yes, he does.
And he likes to talk fast. And I think our listeners are just going to be in for a really fun time because he's so brilliant. And so I can't wait to bring him on, Sean.
I know Tim and I are the same age, and I've had him on exploring the prophetic, and we've had him on exploring the marketplace conversations, or I mean, podcast now conversations. And I just hearing his stories, I just feel like he's super connected to what you and I are trying to curate, which is how do you really connect to who God's called you to be in the first place? How do you really connect relationally to God? How do you keep his voice central and his personality, his heart central to what's going on in your career, in your life? And he's doing that, like he does live events, and he'll do it. He'll even give words of knowledge or prophetic words sometimes in live events. I mean, he's doing it for real, but I mean, the events aren't about that at all, but he doesn't let his faith like take a back seat. I mean, he's right there, and he's a well-published author and voice in our generation. So people are going to love him. Do you think we should bring him on now?
I think we should make him sit and wait a little bit. He's probably wringing his hand, and like
I'm wringing my hands. I'm doing this. I'm excited. I'm like, I can't wait for him to come on. We have a lot of people who are joining us, but we want Ed. Can you come on?
Okay, I want you to sell 300 shares of that. Oh, hey guys! I didn't know what time we started, so
that was perfect.
Such a great introduction. I don't even know how am I supposed to live up to that. So Bob and I live about half an hour away from each other. So when I went to meet him for lunch, it took me about 10 minutes to drive there because speed is my thing. I'm just kidding. It didn't take that long. But I do have a section in one of my books. It's all about waiting, the importance of waiting. And the way I led into the section was after you've flown 900 miles an hour, learning to wait is a challenge. So God's good at teaching us that, even if we've flown really fast. Let me just put it that way.
Well, I think probably our wives would tell the three of us, or telling the three of us, that patience is probably not our biggest virtue for any of us. I love watching Bob when he needs to wait in a line. It's like when he gets that, like this weird uncommon anxiety. You as a fighter pilot, like I just couldn't imagine watching you wait at Disneyland for the ride to start. And then go on the ride, and it's not even that big of a deal because you're a fighter pilot. Like, who cares?
You don't even want to know. So, by the way, the thing you mentioned about the wives is really true. I think if they all got together, they would be able to share some great stories. But we have here in San Diego, someone, and I'm not sure who it was, in the civil planning committee decided to put those left-hand turning arrows at every single light. And I'm talking about like down here in my neighborhood where 3 cars go through the light like every hour. There's one of those left-hand things. Oh, no. And so I was sitting there. You're sitting there with the blinker and the lights there, and there's no cars coming because no cars are ever going to come, and you're sitting there waiting, and it was in that moment that I realized, oh, this is what it's like when God is teaching you how to wait. So he wouldn't need to teach it to you if you didn't need to learn it. That's the idea.
So. Well, Ed, before we get into you as a consultant, as an author, someone who's helping people all over the place. We just wanted to kind of have a conversation, and we're going to have our listeners are going to be able to ask you questions. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing?
Let me say this before we go there. Make sure if you're on right now, because people are joining from all over the place, make sure that you ask your questions now so we can get to them and bring you into the conversation. So ask questions about anything with the marketplace, hearing God's voice in your career, going to the next level, those kinds of things. Ed is an expert at bringing wisdom to process. So I think it's going to be really fun. Go ahead, Bob.
All I was going to say, Ed, is tell us what you've been doing.
Oh, cool. Thank you for that. By the way, the question thing, it's been my experience with my live shows that you get like one question in the first 5 minutes and 15 questions in the last 5 minutes. So if you really want your question in, put it in now. Yeah. That's the way it works. People, the first ones start the second. Anyway. So thank you for that. So, short introduction. If you've never heard me on the show before, I was a fighter pilot. So I flew F-18s in the Marine Corps, all of that despite failing kindergarten. I truly did kindergarten twice. which was a great experience if you've ever gone through it, to learn that you might not be the sharpest tool in the shed. So I ended up graduated from kindergarten and college, and I went in the Marine Corps, really based on the principle of following successful people. I had a simple rule. That rule was, I found successful people and patterned my life after them. I did what they did and I didn't do what they didn't do. And then I looked at unsuccessful people and I did what they didn't do and I didn't do what they did, basically. Is as simple as you want to put it right there. That was my whole life principle. That principle led me into the cockpit of the F-18, led me to Top Gun, the real Top Gun school, graduating from there. I was an instructor in the Marine Corps for 1-on-1 dogfighting. And then I got out in the middle of all that and ended up launching a business. I started writing books and sharing a message really about how you can take your vision and your mission and your passion and your message and put it into a way of communicating so that you can change the world. And that's what I'm doing now. I wrote 5 books. I speak all around the world, or at least I used to speak all around the world until this year. Now I'm virtually all around the world, I guess, still. And working on my 6th book right now, guys. I've just finally got the outline going. So life is good.
What was your last book, and what can people look forward to from it? I actually have.
Yes, so my last book, I think it's actually behind me someplace. Oh, here it is. So my last book is a book called 21 Day Miracle, which basically is a book about how to get things done fast or how to accomplish things fast. There's a principle in the personal development world, which I'm intimately familiar with. You probably are too, that this turtle against the rabbit and tortoise and the hare situation, where the tortoise always wins. You've heard that before. Well, the truth is, in the real world, if you put a rabbit next to a turtle, the rabbit wins every time, always. And so this book is about building your life around strategic sprints. My belief system is like everything in the world, from teens to tomatoes, operates off of sprint and rest. Sprint and rest. I have a 13-year-old boy, one of my 4 kids, who's growing really fast right now. He's almost as tall as I am. And if you watch teens grow, they grow really fast and then they pause for a while. Well, tomatoes, the garden right out here, same thing. And as an entrepreneur, business owner, career-minded person, or if you have a passion to change the world, the most successful people I know operate their life on sprints and then rest. And this book is about building those into your life.
Wow, that's so good. Well, we have some great questions coming up. Do you want to ask a question first, Bob, or do you want to go straight to our viewers?
I just want to say, I read the book and I love the interval piece. And, it right now, for me, what's working at is I'm a little bit overwhelmed and busy in a lot of different areas, and taking time, like even during the day, to stop the sprint and rest is what I'm having to do right now. But usually it's not on that kind of interval. So thank you for that. Let's ask a question, Sean.
Well, the first one I'm going to go to, and this isn't the first question, but the first question I'm going to go to, just because it highlights something you shared on one of the podcasts with us, is from Pieter Dan Decker. And tell us where you're from, Peter, too. He's asking from YouTube. We have Facebook, YouTube, our platform, all kinds of people on here. So he said, can you elaborate on your dream to raise 400 leaders in your lifetime in the business and governmental arenas from your previous episode with us? So you've talked about raising up a number of leaders, and I believe you did use the word 400. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question. Thank you, Peter. By the way, I just noticed I can see all the questions over here on chat. I didn't even check that out. So awesome. We just got inundated with some great questions. So the gist of this is really simple. And I'm going to call you Pieter, but I think that's how I'm pronouncing your name properly. God has put us on this earth to create incredible, abundant, everlasting change on this earth. And if you look at, for example, in Revelation, there's this little verse where he says, the God of heaven will crush Satan under his feet. And then 5 chapters later, it says the God of heaven will crush Satan under your feet. And I'm like, his feet or our feet? Is it his feet or our feet? And then I realized it's either both, or our feet are his feet. One way or another, we're the ones that he's using to make this change. And it was about 8 years ago, Peter, when I started to realize I was complaining a lot about the leadership in our country without doing much about it. And I realized we've already been given the solutions to these problems. And so it was at that point that I decided that I wanted to start raising up leaders. I have a vision, by the way, to moving into the White House and becoming president. That's part of the mission. But you can't just do it. I mean, we have 3 branches of government, and there's a lot of leadership. And so if you look, for example, in Congress, there's roughly 540 senators and congressmen and women. It's a little bit less than that, but there's a general number of what you have. Well, if you have 400 people in there who are all passionate people who love God, who want to see things change, and who have a good heart and a willingness to use that good heart to create change, you can totally change things really quickly. So my vision for that is to raise leaders up at the state and the national level to really begin to start to create the kind of change that we need. And anybody familiar with the way the government operates knows that either side, like we have in the United States, for example, an unrighteous party and a self-righteous party. Neither one of those is all that great, honestly. So the idea is to create something new out of what we have now. And the fact is, I think the time is right for that.
So good, Ed. We have a question from Blake Sitz. He says, I'm a pastor and a general supervisor over 5 independent grocery stores. How do you balance without one area lacking when multitasking? So talk to us about balance, Ed.
Awesome. By the way, Blake, I just want to say this. I think this is the model right now.
Right.
So this pastor and general supervisor of 5 independent grocery stores, it used to be, if you were a pastor, you were in this like spiritual bubble here. And if you were running a grocery store, you were in this bubble over here. And the only place those two things would like show up next to each other is at the men's accountability group on Tuesday morning or whatever, right? So like, you know what I mean? And now I love the way that all of these things are merging, because the truth is all of these things do come and merge together. Now, what I just said actually is the key to answering your question. So the first thing I will tell you is I don't use the term balance, because I don't think that's even, like, if you take what I said about teens and tomatoes growing really fast and the vine replenishing and regrowing, there's no balance there. There's just like on and off, And so I don't usually use the word balance, because I think it's a goal. First of all, I don't think it's an important goal to achieve. Second, I don't think you can achieve it anyway. So it's not something that I'm after. Here's what I'm after. I'm after 2 things. Number 1 is holy, and number 2 is whole. Okay, so you hear people talk about whole and holy. I'm going to go after whole for just a second and kind of talk about what I mean by that. Here's what I think whole is. Like in my life, I've got business, work, family, sharing a message, changing the government, raising my kids, going to baseball games, cooking dinner every once in a while, cleaning the kitchen, cleaning my office. Those are all sort of in the sphere. Well, yesterday, I went and took my 2-year-old daughter to the park for about an hour and a half. Now, the truth is, Blake, I was stuck yesterday. I'm working on my 6th book, and I needed like this hook around the framework of the book. And I had been trying for weeks to find this hook. It was just like, you ever feel stuck where you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm like stuck in this thing. So I was trying to find the hook. And finally I just said, I'm going to take my daughter to the park. I took her to the park. I actually took out another book, started reading it up against a tree while she was playing in the park. And all of a sudden the idea came to me that I'd been looking for 2 weeks. Well, I wasn't working when I was at the park. I was leisure. And a lot of people would put like work over here and leisure over here and spirituality over here, but a whole person, those things tend to come together. Mm-hmm. So what I would encourage you to do is forget about like priorities, forget about balance, and try to be a whole person where all of these things kind of fit together and flow together well. And I can tell you that wisdom allows you to be able to do that really well.
Wow, that's a great answer. I love the thought of that, because I think so many people are they get this idealism of what it should all look like, and 15 minutes here, 25 minutes here, and then it doesn't actually work depending on your season. And for Sri and I, because we've had to be adaptive, because I traveled for so long, 120 days a year or more, we had to be so adaptive that we lived a really balanced life in the midst of an imbalanced kind of schedule. And, a whole life is a better word for it. I love this question, you guys. This is from Chris DiGiorno. And Chris, I want some of your tacos. He's a restaurant owner for 13 years, doing very well, even through the pandemic. I sell 1 million tacos a year. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Out of a 1,200 square foot building.
You're the one.
When thinking about opportunities to open more locations, I consistently ask myself, what is my why? Why do I do this? I make a great living. As a business, we give generously to our community in the name of hope. What is your catalyst to find your why? This is an awesome question.
All right, cool. So Chris, I'm going to answer your question in a way that you were not expecting, which is this. I don't spend almost any time on why. And I know that sounds like I just broke Simon Sinek's rule, start with why. Here's what I do. I start with what. Write that down. You start with what. Here's the reason why. So Psalm 37:4 says, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. If you look, for example, at like Psalm 21, it says the king, that you've given the king his desire, right? So you've got this concept in scripture about like this desire that's in your heart. That's a what? Like if I walked up to you and I said, what do you want to accomplish in business? How much do you want to make? What kind of impact do you want to have? And what do you want your lifestyle to be like? Which, by the way, those 3 questions summarize every goal I've ever heard from every business owner: income, impact, lifestyle. Okay. So if I was to ask you those questions, those are what questions. What do you want to make, Chris, next year? What do you want your business to net next year? What kind of impact do you want to have on your community? What kind of lifestyle do you want to have? Those are what questions. My experience is that why and how questions, especially initially when you're creating goals and dreaming, why and how questions slow the process down. For example, one of my goals is to be a trillionaire. I want to be worth $1.2 trillion. So I'm going to show you how this works. Ready? So I'm like writing my goals and dreams down. One of my goals is to write a book that sells 50 million copies. Okay, so that's mine. So check it out. I write it down. What do you want to do? I want to be worth $1.2 trillion. Well, how are you going to do that? I don't know. There goes that dream. Literally, you had a dream for like 6 seconds and it goes flying out the window because see, how starts to come later on. Why? Oftentimes starts to come later on. And so the first thing I will tell you, Chris, is that your heart can be trusted. If you have something that you've been wanting to do and you don't even know why, or you don't even know how, that's probably because when you delight in the Lord, he'll give you the desires of your heart, and the desires that he's like stirring up inside of you actually come from him. Okay. We get so worried as believers sometimes that like we're going to go on the wrong course, or like the dark side, the dark side is going to conquer us or whatever. Look, man, you have people in your life and friends in your life to be able to help you through that stuff. But I say, start with what? What does God put on your heart? Don't figure out why just yet. Don't figure out how just yet. You will figure it out, by the way. Look, you didn't sell 1 million tacos a year without knowing how. You'll figure that stuff out. Start with what? And again, I know you didn't ask me that question, but I'm giving you, I think, the answer that you really wanted, hopefully not in the answer that you asked.
I mean, to me, I've never heard anyone say that. Have you, Bob? Like, that's really a unique take.
It's unique. And I think Chris is probably scratching his head like, what? What do you mean? What? And
I have a friend of mine
because it's so practical.
That's you getting stuck in how pies.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think how pies, or sometimes you can go about it where you look at who am I called to? Like what, like he sees this community, like who's the who? So I like that. I like the what or the who, but the why is sometimes a hard question, like you're saying. And so I think
we've got another question, Sean, I'd like to ask. Yeah. And the reason
I'm your last one, because we only have a few more minutes of that.
I know we have a few more minutes. And the reason I'm going to ask this is because we speak to this in our new book, Wired to Hear. And I think it's from Lawrence Long. How do you incorporate making disciples while operating your business?
Ooh, I love that question.
Yeah, me too.
Wait, you want to answer that?
You
guys don't want to take that one from me? No, I'm just kidding. So let's take two contexts, right? Let's take sharing the gospel and let's take making disciples. So what would sharing the gospel be? Sharing the gospel would be telling someone, hey, this is the truth. This man, Jesus, lived on the earth. That's history. And he died and he rose again for you. That's the gospel, right? And like, we love the gospel, man. It's true and it's awesome and it's life-giving, but that's the gospel. But let's talk about making disciples. Making disciples takes the gospel process and turns it into a life-fulfilling, never-ending, world-changing process. So discipleship would include education, government, finance. I would even go so far as to say that discipleship would include, for example, like an insurance company. Think about this for a moment. What is work? Work is nothing more than a reflection of who God is. Who is God? Creator, sustainer, restorer, right? So if God is a restoring God, well, guess what? So is an insurance company. So if you sell insurance, I want you to think about this for a second. If you sell insurance, which we always talk about, like selling insurance, okay? If you sell insurance, you are selling restoration. You are mirroring the restorative nature of God. In other words, you're living in God's image. So when I think about sharing the gospel, I think about the category that I just said right there. When I think about discipleship, I spread the dough into all of the corners, because truthfully, one of the issues we have in our country is our education system has created a generation of people who don't know how to think about how a government should lead, right? Well, that's discipleship. And the truth is, Lawrence, I don't have time to go through the history of this, but back in the 60s, the church got so passionate about the gospel that we forgot about discipleship. And now I think the church is starting to understand discipleship is more than just like teaching people how to read their Bible and pray, which is very important. Discipleship is moving into all the corners of the sphere and really fulfilling God's calling when he said in Matthew 28 to go into all the world and preach the gospel. That was this part of discipleship over here. Anyway, over to you.
Let's look at Patricia Orts just said, I sell insurance. It's my ministry.
Yes.
I love that we got someone who said, yes, I do that. Well, this has been, I mean, Ed, this is phenomenal. Like what you're sharing. I just think this is why you are who you are, and people, you're in high demand. But thanks for spending some of your energy and your time on our audience, because I know that they so appreciate it. And for those of you who are watching, you can get Ed's materials. Where do we go, Ed? Just edrush.com?
edrush.com. If you go right there, I have a weekly email that I send out just about every week. I'm about to take a little break on that just for my book to write. And then Ed Rush book, you can get 21 Day Miracle if you want. Guys, you're awesome. It is so good. I love talking to you. I love having our conversation together.
Ed, do you have any more energy like at any time of the day, or is this just your low energy?
I haven't even ran out of coffee this morning too. So this is just pure water, and there's no moonshine. People always ask, is that moonshine?
I need a blood transfusion from his blood.
Thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah, thank you for listening. Bob and I so appreciate you. You know, we're still experimenting with these talks. Give us some feedback. You could write us at info@bullsministries.com to tell us what you're loving and what kind of guests you'd want to come on here as well. Also, our new book, Wired to Hear, is coming out. You can pre-order it. And in the pre-order, there's a special video series with people who are sharing what they would have told their younger self if they had the opportunity to go back in time to help their younger self through some hard times. We also have a signed copy. I was going to hold up the one from me and Bob. The first one I signed over his name as a joke.
Yeah.
I thought it was a brilliant way to do it. But then we have a signed copy for you, and you're going to get it earlier than everyone else. So go to bullsministries.com, get yourself a Wired to Hear book, and I know you're going to enjoy it, especially if you're in that career marketplace field. That's who it's for. And thank you, everybody from YouTube and Facebook and our platform for joining. So Ed and Bob, we're signing off. This was awesome.
Thanks, Ed.
See ya.